everyone, I'm Sam and welcome to a special episode of the Shoogly Stitch, my podcast where I talk all things spinning, knitting, and fibercraft related. So today is going to be a little bit of a combination of my normal podcast episode style as well as an update on how my spinning fiber advent has been going for the first week. So to start off with, I don't really have enough to do a full podcast episode about because I've been working on one project pretty consistently. But first, let me tell you what I'm wearing. So today I'm wearing the Metamorphic Sweater, which is a pattern by Andrea Mowry, and this is both my first project that I ever made in my own hand spun, as well as the first sweater that I ever made in my own hand spun, as well as the only sweater so far that I've made in my own hand spun. Which is why it has kind of bracelet length sleeves, because I underestimated how much fiber I would actually need for a whole project. But I have talked about it on the show before, so you can go check out some other videos if you want more details on the project itself. Right, so moving on to the main thing that I've been working on since the middle of November. I got in my head about that time that I wanted a Christmas jumper and I was envisioning a very specific thing. So I have been working on my version of the cloud blouse, and hopefully you can see that this is somewhat sparkly. I'll hold it up. You should be able to see the shimmer kind of shifting. This is basically all I've been working on since the middle of November, alongside some spinning, but as far as knitting projects go, this has pretty much been it. And I can't exactly remember what made me think of it or how it got in my head. I think probably subconsciously had been inspired by other people who have knitted sparkly Christmas jumpers before that I've seen on YouTube. And I know Venetia, the woolly worker, did a sparkly kind of holly jumper last year. Whatever that Knitting for Olive pattern is, her base color was a sparkly cream color. So maybe that kind of had inspired me. I've definitely seen some other people who have done like a solid color jumper or a normal pattern, but in some kind of sparkly way. So I think I maybe seen a black version. I know that Laura Penrose is doing some kind of like red festive version of her souffle sweater. So I think maybe that's why I'd begun thinking that I wanted some kind of Christmas jumper. And I knew that I definitely couldn't do like a whole Fair Isle situation with only about a month to go. Because that's kind of on the long-term bucket list, is one of these potentially round yoke. Like I think the Skandir has a nice round yoke pattern, but there's definitely a few options out there. But I never want to start making a Christmas sweater with enough time left that I would actually be able to finish the Christmas sweater by the time December rolls around. But I do think that this one might be manageable. We'll see. I'm still knitting away on it. But let me tell you a little bit about the pattern. So the cloud blouse is a pattern that is designed for 2 strands of mohair silk held together. So I'm using 1 strand of Drops brushed alpaca silk, which looks like this, as well as this yarn, well not yarn, but this held alongside it. And this is the Drops glitter, and it's just this thin, I mean it is just plastic, but strand that you can hold alongside any yarn, so it makes it possible for any yarn to become kind of a festive yarn. So that's them held together, and then when knit up, it makes this lovely fluffy fabric that is, like I said, a bit sparkly. And it isn't completely opaque, so especially if you hold it up to the light, you can kind of see through it. But it's not as see-through as a lot of the patterns I was finding. So when I got this in my head, I knew that I wanted something fluffy and something glittery, and I didn't have a particular pattern in mind. But I've been really liking oversized sweaters lately, really behind the trend on that. But I just wanted something comfortable for Christmas so that you can have a nice big dinner and not feel like you're wearing clothes that are too restricting. So I definitely had in my head that I wanted a drop shoulder pattern, and then I figured everything else was kind of customizable as far as like length and neckline and whatnot. So I looked at a few options. I did look at the Cumulus blouse, also by Petite Knit. I'm not sure if I said this cloud sweater is by a pattern by Petite Knit as well, or cloud blouse. but the Cumulus blouse is a raglan, and I didn't really want a raglan. I just feel like it looks more casual, potentially. It's like a sportier look. I don't know. It just wasn't what I was going for. And I feel like an oversized raglan looks sloppier and less intentional than an oversized drop shoulder. So that's part of why I was thinking drop shoulder rather than raglan. I also considered, right when I was looking at the pattern, there was a new pattern just released by Jessie May, which is the sheer fluff sweater. But the gauge on that was a bit too loose for me. And I didn't want this to be something that I absolutely had to wear an underlayer with. I probably will wear some kind of like shirt or tank top or whatever underneath this, just because I do tend to do that with jumpers, but I didn't want to have to. I didn't want it to be like completely see-through where your undergarment was going to be like part of your outfit, if that makes sense. So the gauge on that was a bit too loose, and also that pattern had a set-in sleeve, and again, I definitely wanted something that was going to be a bit more oversized. This pattern calls for 2 strands of mohair held together. Mohair is a bit thick or thinner than the alpaca silk. The alpaca silk is definitely not like an actual fingering weight, but it's maybe a light fingering. So that combined with the gold, I feel like creates a fabric that is a little bit more transparent than the pattern as written. I think 2 strands of mohair silk would still be thicker than this, but again, not as transparent as some of those other patterns that are written for only 1 strand of mohair silk. My gauge is slightly off because of the yarn combination I'm using. So I am actually knitting the size 5, which is the large, which should give me the measurements of the size 4 or the medium. And I'm using a US size 5 needle, which is a 3.75, because that's the fabric that I preferred. I do believe that the pattern, let me double check. So yeah, the pattern does call for a 4mm needle rather than a 3.75, and I did swatch with that, but I decided that that was still a little bit too loose. So that's part of why I did, my gauge is not quite lining up to the pattern as written. Now, the other thing about this pattern is that I will probably not be following how it's written for the sleeves and the pearl accent kind of details, or the neckline, to be honest. As written, it's kind of got these somewhat unfinished looking hems, so you knit a few rows of ribbing, I believe, on most of the sleeve cuffs and the hem, and then you do a few more rounds of just stockinette, so it kind of has this rolled edge finish, which is not something that I particularly care for. And also, when I was envisioning this, I was definitely envisioning some kind of like longer neck situation. I haven't decided if that's going to be more of a funnel neck or a like a turtleneck, rolled neck. I haven't fully decided. I think I might go for a 1x1 rib and then decide. We shall see. I think the opening, the pattern, like the opening for the neck in the pattern, is somewhat wide. It's not particularly close, although that might just be how the collar is actually finished. It might just be written like her normal patterns are written, but then she just hasn't added as thick of a neckband as normal. So hard to tell, but it also has these pearl details along the shoulders. So when you join the shoulder seam, you're supposed to have, like, here's my shoulder seam where I picked up for the back, and it kind of is quite smooth and blends out. You're actually supposed to have like a pearl bump detail there, as well as when you pick up for the armholes, you're supposed to have a pearl bump detail there, and it's just not really something that I'm finding necessary on this project because it is kind of glittery. It's not just like it's one solid color. I think there's enough interest in the project on its own, so I probably will not do that, just because pearl bump accents are not my favorite type of accents. The other thing that I've been working on lately, although not very frequently because I am actually trying to get that jumper done, and I'm not, like, I might be on track. I think it's about to like belly button or just past, so I think I probably need about 4 more inches on the body, and then I need to do the sleeves. So today's the 8th, potentially doable, but it will be a bit tight. So this is something I started and then haven't been working on very much. And I don't have a pattern to share. It's a self-drafted object or self-drafted item. And it's just going to be a simple headband. I'm using some hand spun yarn, as you might be able to tell. So here's a cake of hand spun. I may or may not have shown it on the podcast a wee while ago, but this is from Cat Knits. It was called Ironic Grooves is the colorway. It's Falkland merino. It's nice and soft. It's not necessarily colors I would always pick myself. I think it was a double-ended gradient, so it faded from, started with orange, faded to yellow, this kind of minty green, and then into teal, and then back from teal to kind of the minty green, yellow, orange. I actually can't remember how I decided to spin this. Okay, so yeah, what I ended up deciding to do with this is a fractal 2-ply, which basically means that the colors repeat and you end up with a lot of barber pulling. I'm not following a pattern. I just wanted a headband for when I go running. So it's not a particularly thick one because a lot of knitted headbands that you see are written to be like super, super warm and cozy. And because I do like sweat when I run, I didn't want something that was going to be like the warmest thing ever. So I didn't want a double layer or anything like that. I just wanted it to be something to keep the chill off my ears, because I find that my ears really start to hurt sometimes if it's properly cold outside. And I thought that this would be a nice choice because there are some bright colors in it, so if I like stick that on the front, people can see me coming. It looks like I should be getting back into some of those kind of teals and oranges soon, the brighter colors, because obviously the darker teal is not particularly visible. So that's the other thing that's been kind of fun to work on. It's also definitely showing me that my hand spun is not particularly consistent. So you'll see a lot of kind of bigger and smaller chunks in there, but oh well. It'll be functional when it's done. So that should be fun. And all I've done is a 1x1 ribbing with a slipped stitch on either edge. So nothing particularly complicated, and I'll probably just sew them together at the end. When I started planning it, I had thought that I would do a provisional and then just completely forgot that I had planned to do a provisional cast on, because obviously that would allow me to Kitchener stitch the end and make it properly seamless. It doesn't really matter. It's just a purely functional project, so it'll be fine. And I wasn't going to go back and recast on at that point in time. All right, so that is all of the knitting that I have to share with you. What you're going to see next is a little compilation of the spinning that I've been working on through the week. Some of it includes a little bit of me chatting. I think I videoed a lot of the spinning for the first day, and then progressively less spinning, just because spinning all kind of looks the same. It gets boring if you watch too much of it. So that's what you're going to see next. Alright, so it is officially December 1st, which means it is time to open up my first advent calendar parcel. As I said before, if you watched my most recent video, I made these up myself, blended them on a drum carder, and then I didn't number them, but I just sealed them all, and they're all mixed up. So I don't know what's in each of them. So it could be either a luxury fiber blend or a sari silk blend. So let's open up this first one and see what it is. Oh, funny. Okay, so this is actually the one and only blend that I made with a brown natural colored Shetland fiber, as opposed to the wool, the white wool. So I'm just going to start spinning this one up. So here's the little batling. And we'll give it a go. If you're wondering what I'm wearing today, it is a pattern from Lina magazine. I can't actually remember the name of it just now. I think it's by someone whose Instagram handle is the Scandi Knitter, something like that. Scandi Knitter maybe. And it's a steeked cardigan pattern. I'm not sure if I've talked about it on the podcast before or not, but yes, it's knit in the round and steeked down the middle, and steeked at the sleeves as well. I mostly like it, except that the collar is quite wide, so it doesn't look as good with like a t-shirt as I would like. It's quite, yeah, like wide fitting, but it does look fine with like collared shirts and whatnot, and with the vest over top. I haven't really thought about how I'm going to spin these. I think maybe long draw, just because it's a style of spinning that I quite enjoy. The first thing I've done is just split it in half, so we'll see how we get on with that, and maybe change partway through, because this is all about just kind of having fun. I'm using somewhat older bobbins as opposed to the nice new Ashford bobbin, so it might be a little bit rattly as I get going, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Tighten up the drive band, or the brake band, excuse me. It take a little bit when you first start spinning to figure out what tension you need, because too little tension, and on the brake band for this style of spinning wheel Scotch tension, too little tension on that means you won't have any uptake and you'll just get an overspun single. But too much tension means that the fiber might feel like it's being sucked out of your fingers, which is also not ideal. So far, it seems like I might still have not quite enough tension on that. This is actually the first time that I've spun this specific blend, because the samples that I was doing were kind of on either side of the proportion of sari silk to wool. So the samples were about 25% and about 10%, I believe. And so I wanted something in between, so this is 15%. The samples I spun were also with a white base wool rather than this natural brown. Gosh, really can't get that tension quite right. Let's see. That seems to be a bit better. If you don't have it high enough, when you try and feed in the single, it kind of just goes all pigtaily and floppy. So you do need to get the balancing act just right. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to save all these up to ply at the end of December, or if I'm going to ply as I go. I might see how long this actually takes me to spin the roughly kind of 10 gram minis. I mean, it could definitely get done within a day, depending on how much time I want to spend and how busy my December looks, and then I could ply the following day. And plying should be quicker, because obviously plying it on itself, it's only half the distance is spinning the entire single. I do really love plying as well. That's probably my favorite part, which I think is different from a lot of people. I just love seeing how the fiber actually finally comes together, how the yarn finally comes together, because when you spin the single, sometimes depending on your color management, it can be hard to visualize how it's actually going to ply together. So that's definitely the part that I always want to get to. Let's see. Seems nice so far. I think it should be quite an airy yarn. I really need to clean off some of my newer bobbins. I just feel like they provide a smoother spinning experience. I think the main difference is actually that the inside of the bobbin is coated in some kind of plastic potentially, so it is a bit less rattly than these old ones. But the nice thing about Ashford is that it all kind of works with each other, so even though my spinning wheel is about a 60s or 70s wheel, it works with all the modern accessories, and like I was able to put a new flyer on that has more capacity and has multiple ratios. When I first got this spinning wheel, I actually got it from my sister-in-law's mother-in-law. She's one of these kind of really crafty people who seems to have tried her hand at just about every kind of craft you could think of, and I don't think the spinning ever really stuck for her. So I was chatting with her one day just about crafts in general, and we got on the topic of spinning somehow, and she let me know, oh, I have this spinning wheel, do you want to give it a go? And of course I said yes, because I was already really into knitting. Hadn't really given spinning that much thought, but I also hadn't been presented with the opportunity, so obviously given the option to try out a spinning wheel for free, I swiftly took it and really enjoyed it. I took a little bit to get the wheel sorted to make it usable, because it did need a few new accessories, a new drive band, a new brake band, etc. So my very first skein of yarn wasn't actually that successful, and that was primarily because I was having some major issues with the tension on the drive band, so it kept popping off. But once I sorted all that out, it was a much more successful spinning experience. I don't remember what I was saying before that, or how I even got on that topic. Oh yeah, that's the good thing about Ashford, is the fact that they are, that you can use the vintage stuff alongside the new things. So it does make it a really great, versatile beginner wheel. I'm trying to roughly spin for a 2-ply fingering weight, so it's a relatively thin single that I'm spinning. I think a lot of people have this problem, I don't know, once they get into spinning, where their default single does become quite fine, and they actually find it harder to start spinning a thicker single. I had kind of thought that what my approach to this advent would be to spin everything about the same weight, and I think that is probably what I'm going to do. But in the future, I would really like to start working on spinning up some samples of different weights, and not just my default. I think it would also be good to have kind of a challenge or a target, because there's only so much yarn that I really need to spin. A lot of the yarn I spun lately has just gone into a box to sit there and wait until I have space on my needles to knit it, because certainly I can spin yarn much faster than I can knit it, and I have plenty of yarn already waiting to be knit. But if the final product is effectively a sample, a spinning sample, then that would mean it wasn't actually adding to my stash so much. It would be more as like a reference to keep for like future, so that I could decide if I wanted to spin a particular yarn in a particular way. I know that I'd kind of done samples of it before and had an example that I might want to try and match, if that makes sense. I do like the idea of having like a sample library. So maybe that's something I'll start thinking about in the new year. There's also, within the UK, the Associated Guilds of Weavers, Spinners and Dyers has like I don't know exactly if it's like a master spinner program, or like you can get a certificate of achievement or one of these things, but there's a lot of, that kind of can provide a lot of direction as well. I might switch camera angles here in a minute so that you guys can actually see what I'm spinning from above. Oh, I did that too fine. I think I'll probably put these videos out weekly, and you'll just be able to catch up on a weekly basis. So if you have anything that you'd like to hear me talk about, I would love it if you put some comments down below. It's really great to hear from you all in the comments and have some chats back and forth. I'd love to hear about where your knitting or spinning journeys began. I think a lot of times it does start with family, but equally there's loads of people that kind of teach themselves or come to it in various ways, and a lot of times those can be some great stories. So I would love to hear from you about that if you would like to share. I'm mostly spinning this kind of supported long draw, I think, roughly, which means that I'm drawing my left hand back, and then my right hand, my front hand, is providing some resistance where needed. I believe in some people refer to this as American long draw. I think English long draw is the one where you're just using your left hand. Your front hand isn't involved at all. And I think that I would need my tension to be a bit higher if I were to do that, and potentially to be spinning more from roll-lags or some other kind of a little bit more jumbled up fiber prep. Obviously carding does jumble the fibers up, but when you have a bat and you take it off the carder and then you just kind of strip it down and spin it like this, the fibers are actually fairly aligned. They're not as mixed up as, say, like in a roll-lag or spinning from the fold. If I were spinning from the fold, I could maybe just get away with using just my left hand and not needing that resistance of the front hand. If I just pull my left hand back, I don't really have enough tension pulling the yarn onto the bobbin to actually have that be successful, which is what my right hand is doing. It's pinching the single and providing some resistance and letting more fiber kind of draft in. Can you tell I don't know all the technical terms for this, and no one's ever trained me? Yay for the school of YouTube and Jillian Eve. So I've decided that I do want to ply this as I go instead of saving it all for the end, especially because I have 2 days to do each advent, each parcel. So here is the little center pole ball that I wound up of the brown yarn, brown fiber, with the kind of light pink tweedy bits from the sari silk. I don't know if it's coming across on camera very well, but it is quite a nice color if you like a natural brown. So yeah, I'm just going to ply this up as a 2-ply as I go. and sit here and chat to you guys a little bit. Today is the 2nd. I'm just finished having dinner. I was in the office today. I do work from home usually 2 days a week, and I'm in the office 3 days a week, which is one reason why Vlogmas would be pretty boring if I were to go down that route. Because on days like today, it would be a lot of me just having gone to the office, which isn't that interesting to watch, really. So let's see. So I'm just making a 2-ply, and then my plan is to wash the skeins as I go, so that hopefully I can, by day 3 or 4, well, actually, if I wash this tonight, I should be able to just use it tomorrow for crochet. But as I go, I can make little crochet squares like I had mentioned in my plans for the Advent, because that is an ongoing project that I do have with 4-ply yarn. In general, I prefer a rounder ply, like a 3-ply, but this is a little bit trickier to do when you're spinning such small quantities. Well, I guess I could do a chain ply, but chain ply is even less enjoyable for me to do. I would rather do a kind of traditional 3-ply. So I'll just be plying from, I should say, either end of a center pole ball. I may not do much talking in this actually, because it's quite hard to talk and count, and I like to count to make sure that my ply is quite consistent. On my wheel and how I like my ply, I think it usually ends up between 8 to 12 treadles before feeding the yarn in. You can see my center pole ball hanging there, and my plied yarn. It's quite thin. It should fluff up in the wash, but it is probably a light fingering, heavy lace weight. Today I'm wearing my Shoogly Sweater, which is one that I actually haven't talked about on the podcast yet, but I probably will shortly. It's a really lovely heavyweight cardigan. It's actually made in like Aran, or maybe even over Aran, heavier than Aran yarn. They claim it's worsted, but it's definitely a heavier weight than that. The only problem with plying from a center pole ball is you do tend to get slightly tangled, in the same way that you might if you were working on a project from either end of the center pole ball, which is how I occasionally work my socks, 2 at a time from either end of a center pole ball. The reality of living with a dachshund is that they bark at anything that breathes and drive you insane when you're just trying to have a peaceful night. Especially when they're 10 months old. Okay, so I've just been on a run in the pouring rain, so you're not going to get my face, but let's pick out Advent number 2 on today, December the 3rd. I don't really know what to go for in here. I can't actually remember what anything was, but I guess I'll just pick out this one on the top. We'll see what's what. Okay, so this is definitely one of the luxury blends. I think this is going to be yak, but luckily I did label these because I knew I wouldn't be able to tell them apart. So let's see. It's yak. So you can see the kind of gray brown fiber mix through there. So yeah, I'm gonna go spin that up. Not sure that I'll record myself, just because spinning looks much the same no matter what I'm spinning. And that's a little bit boring and I don't really have much to talk about today. But yeah, here's day number 2. And here is day 1. It is finished. I hold it hanging down. It looks pretty balanced. This is not a great angle, but you can see that the skein isn't twisting back on itself. So there's that. It does look a little bit like crinkly, so I don't know if I overplied it, but I guess we shall find out in the crocheting or the knitting of it. I see my sample spins there in the background. I actually have already crocheted. I have this vase here that has a lot of the squares that I've done already, and this is the project that I've been working on. So I have crocheted a few squares from my sample pieces, from highest proportion of silk on the left to lowest proportion on the right, and there's still plenty left in the sample skeins. So that is definitely my intention for each day, is to do at least one square like that, and then probably just hold on to the skeins so that I can plan for bigger projects in the future. So there is day 1 all spun up, and day 2 ready to get started. Okey-doke, so I have I've opened 2 days of my Advent, and today I'm opening the 3rd. And again, just randomly gonna stick my hand in there and choose. Oh, also, if you're wondering what I'm wearing, this is the Stockholm slipover in Drops Air. I think it's more cropped than the pattern calls for, and I'm not 100% sold on the neckline, but it's cozy and it's a great layer for the winter. So let's take a look at Advent day 3. I kind of hope I get another sari silk, to be honest. A little bit more interesting, but let's see. Oh, disaster. Right, 2 luxury silks in a row. Luxury blends in a row, that is. So it just looks like white. I think it might be the alpaca blend. Let's look at my label. It is indeed the alpaca blend. And you can tell just because it's kind of like hairy. So I'll do that next. Yeah, I'm just planning to make a granny square from each of my skeins. So I'm not going to bother actually putting this skein into a ball because I'm only going to use enough for a granny square for right now, and I'd rather that the rest be in skein format for anything, for keeping the samples basically. So crochet a little bit with me. Don't judge my crochet skills. I'm a much better knitter than I am a crocheter. Apparently, especially when I'm on camera, I seem to be particularly bad. Plus, the textured yarn is like makes basically 0 difference when knitting, but I have noticed that it does make a somewhat more noticeable difference when crocheting, because there's always that chance that the hook's gonna kind of go through your like split your plies. Also, apparently the way that you spin and ply your yarn for crochet versus knitting should be opposite, I think. So I think that when you're crocheting, because the way you wrap your yarn, you're more likely to unply the yarn if you spun it kind of the traditional way, which is spin Z imply S, I think. So the finished yarn has S twist, and I think when you're crocheting it like, yeah, untwists S twist yarn. I think that's right. I'm not a very technical spinner, if you can't tell. And I feel like I pick up a little about a lot of things, so I've definitely heard something about that at one point, and it's stuck in my brain. Whether or not I can pass that information on to you in a meaningful manner is another question altogether. I'm not sure if I really crochet in a normal way or not. 1, 2. I've heard that there's like pencil hold and knife hold, so I would think that I'm more of a knife hold. The problem is that I taught myself to knit, and then I taught myself to crochet, and for the first however long I was crocheting, I also taught myself from books rather than like YouTube. I was wrapping the yarn in crochet the same way that you wrap the yarn in knitting, which is incorrect. And I think often people who start with crocheting and then learn to knit also have the same issue in the opposite direction. They wrap their yarn in the same direction that they would in crochet, which results in twisted stitches, which is why you see so many questions from new knitters online with twisted stitches. So yeah, that's a very common mistake. So I basically only kind of re-taught myself to crochet the quote-unquote correct way like a few years ago. And I basically only make granny squares. I think it's probably my preference for like home goods and sturdier things. I haven't yet tried to make like clothing out of it, but that's primarily because I don't like feel that there's any gaps in my knitting. Like I don't feel like there's anything that I could crochet better as a wearable than the result that knitting would give me. And I certainly can't crochet without looking, or at least much harder to do that than it is for knitting for me. I can knit really like I can knit without looking at all, as long as it's like stockinette or something simple. So yeah, that's why crochet hasn't really taken off in my life. I do prefer it for stuffed animals as well, or any kind of plushie. I think the sturdier stitches create a more effective toy or stuffed animal. So I have used it for that purpose a few times, but nothing much more than that. What I'm noticing while I do this is that this Shetland is lovely and soft. I'm not sure that I made the smoothest ever bats, and obviously not because there's like sari silk in it, but I'm not sure that the Shetland on its own would have been the smoothest, because I am not a patient enough person for that. But it is a very soft, like the yarn is quite soft and lovely. So I'm just gonna finish this round, then I'll put it down, maybe go make some dinner. Each of these little squares is only 3 rounds, so they're a really quick little addition. Obviously, like a whole blanket of them will take a significant amount of time, but it's very satisfying to finish that little like chunk of a project and feel like you've completed something. So I don't particularly mind that the whole project takes a long time, because each little square is satisfying to finish. The pattern I'm following is the Battenberg blanket, which, to be fair, I can figure out how to crochet granny squares, but I just like the style, and I liked the joining method that she uses. It's a very neat finished result. Okay, so there's 2 rounds of my granny square, and I'll be adding 1 more, so they're each about that big when finished. Okay, time to pick out day number 4, and today I'm hoping for another sari silk because I've had 2 luxury blends the last couple days. Let's see what this is. Yay! Possibly the most Christmassy of them all. It's very much a kind of red sari silk mixed in there. So that's day number 4. So now that you've seen all of the progress up till now, I can share the first 3 days of my Advent with you. So hopefully if you saw my other video, or if you didn't see my other video, I went into the process of creating an entire spinning Advent, which they are still here. I've been opening an envelope every other day, and I actually might open another one at the end of today, just so I can get ahead of the next few days. But I blended up my own fiber blends and then have been spinning them up. So the first one, I've just been grabbing them out completely randomly, so I didn't put numbers on them or anything. So I've just been spinning them as they come. So the first one was this lovely brown with kind of pink sari silk in it. And I've also been crocheting little squares for some of them to add to my scrappy Battenberg blanket. So here is the ends very much not sewn in, but here is the crochet square that goes with that first day. And then the second day I got one of my luxury blends. So this is with 25% baby yak and 75% white Shetland wool. That first brown one was a brown Shetland wool. So you can see that baby yak adds a nice, lovely light brown. And then here is the little granny square. And then the third day is an alpaca and Shetland blend. So that's another luxury blend, and that is, again, 25% alpaca and 75% Shetland. And I am not making a granny square with this because, as you can see, it's meant to have white accents. And even though this is a different color white, I just feel like it's like not that impactful to have a white square within other white squares. So I will not be adding this to the blanket. But so far I am super happy with these. I think it's going to be super cute to have like my entire samples all done. By the time I'm done with the month of December, I should have 12 little mini skeins all spun up, and they'll be great reference points for the future if I want to make other blends or see how different sari silks kind of spin up into the fibers. So really happy with this, and yeah, I'll keep going and keeping you updated on the progress as we go through the rest of the month. Now, I am actually heading into Edinburgh for the next few days. I had some holiday days to use up, so I'm super excited to get to spend a few days in the city. We had some like Airbnb vouchers to use, as well as a few restaurant gift cards, so I'm hoping that I can get a little bit of footage of some of the very festive Christmassy markets and different Edinburgh festive vibes that are going on. So hopefully I have a little bit more of that to share with you. But because of that, I'm actually going to open up my next Advent today, just so that I can hopefully get ahead of the next week, like keep up with what's going on, because I obviously won't be able to spin for the next few days. I'm halfway through spinning the 4th envelope already, which is a white and red sari blend. So let's take a quick look at what the next one is. Right, as I said, I don't know what anything is. I'm kind of hoping for another sari one, I think. Let's go to the bottom and see. Okay. Show you first. Let's see. Ah, blue. Okay, this was definitely my favorite color of sari silk that I purchased. It was like this royal blue. really lovely, really lovely tweedy bits. And this is inspiring me. I think I would love to do some kind of, like, not a white base, because the white base yarn is quite pastel once it's finished being spun up, but potentially like get into dyeing, which is not a route I've gone down yet, but is something that I think I will need to consider, because I do have a lot of like pale white, beige, cream colored fleeces. So dyeing up some of the fleece after washing it, but before carding it, potentially like grays, or even I could see a green with some of this royal blue tweed in it being really lovely. Something to investigate, but yeah, I'm really excited for this color. So I think that's all from me just now. Thanks for joining me on this special episode of the Shoogly Stitch, and I will see you again hopefully next weekend. Bye!